From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello, welcome once again to Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis, glad to have you with us here today. It's a big day because we're just a couple of days away from, well, you know what, from the election. Actually, today, if you are watching this, whatever you want to call it, that pre-election thing is over because it has just ended. Early voting is no longer an option. So if you were planning on voting for mayor or alderman, you got to do it on Tuesday, like everybody else. The way it's supposed to be, the traditional way. We've got a panel of very interesting people with us today to talk about where we're at, just to kind of take a snapshot of where we're at and where we're going in the next couple of days. I'm referring to Lou Ransom, who is the executive editor of the Chicago Defender. Thanks for coming back again today. Jimm Dispensa is with us. Jimm Dispensa is with Early and Often, the Chicago News Cooperative, and I guess it would be all right to call you a geek, right? I mean, you're kind of an information geek of the highest order. You've been collecting data forever about aldermen and the wards, and hopefully now you're making a living doing that, so congratulations to you. Maria Torres is also joining us. Maria is the head of Latin American and Latino Studies at the University of Illinois Chicago, and we're glad to have an academician on the program with us today, maybe to kind of class the place up a little.
All right.
So there's so much to begin with, but Lou, let's start with you. Your newspaper, the proud Chicago Defender, has made its endorsement for mayor, and Carol Mosley Braun has her first newspaper endorsement.
We looked at over all the qualifications and figured that she was the most qualified, looking at, you know, being a U.S. senator, being an ambassador, being a clerk of Recorder of Deeds,
yeah.
and also a state senator. You know, nobody else had that range of experience, and we looked to that. The odd thing about this election is that the mold is Richard Daley. You know, so you say, do you want a mayor like Richard Daley, or do you want something else? We decided that we wanted something else. You know, but when you look at it, say, I remember walking into a high school and all the kids screamed because the mayor came in, you know, and I said, that's the only mayor they've ever known, you know. So, and for
you could be 60 and it's the only
that's
mayor.
Right. And so there's an awful lot of people even on city council. This is the only mayor they've ever had, you know. So you start.
He's the only mayor they've ever taken orders from.
That's true. You know, so you start looking at that and say, okay, what does your mayor, what qualifications should your mayor have? And we thought that she had the most qualifications.
Now, this is interesting in light of some of the polling numbers that have been coming out. Carol Mosley Braun did her, is it fair to say it was her own poll? I don't know, but the poll showed her with 22.5%, Victory Research poll, which put her in second place, but other polls are not so kind to her. Where are we at? What's going to happen on Tuesday?
Well, I think everybody's asking the question, you know, what percentage of the black vote will Rahm Emanuel get? What percentage of the white vote? What percentage of the Latino vote? There are a lot of pundits trying to add up those numbers and suggest that if turnout is in the neighborhood of 550,000 to 600,000, that the sort of 25-75-25 rule will apply, meaning if Rahm can get 25% of the black vote, 75% of the vote from the predominantly white wards is what I mean by that, and 25% of the Latino vote, he will likely get past the 50% and avoid the runoff.
This has been one of the, I must say, to me, incredible and remarkable things that I wouldn't have predicted, and I don't think too many others would either, to have seen the amazing numbers that Rahm Emanuel is rolling up in for lack of a better term, the black community and the Latino community in Chicago. It's incredible. I mean, and given particularly the fact that there are two very prominent, very competent Latino candidates in the mix, to see him doing that well in the Latino community?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. I think that he obviously has major obstacles. I think he has been identified with calling immigration the third rail of American politics. It's not just that he advised the president not to take on immigration is that he fanned the flames of anti-immigration. So I don't think it's just the Latino community that is concerned about that, but there is something about name recognition. And one of the things that I think that we are witnessing in this election is if we've gone from a economy that used to produce a lot of middle-class jobs, we really are in a bifurcated economy in the United States, and increasingly in this city as well. And that means that you've got your high financial sector up here, and the pyramid is very, very narrow, and you've got your low service jobs. And the Rahm Emanuel campaign is playing, representing in a certain sense, that level of money that we have seen accumulated up on the top. So you buy a lot of airtime and name recognition.
Well, that's one of the things I really want to spend some time talking about today. But Fernando Diaz from OI was on the program a couple weeks ago and said that the way they're looking at it, that it looks like maybe 12% of registered voters in, again, I hate these terms, but in the Latino community, fewer than 12% will vote. You think that's about right?
No, I think it will probably be higher than that. I mean, most of these elections, we end up getting about a 35%. And when you control for age and registration, we usually get numbers that look pretty much the same as the rest of the population. So I would think it would be higher than 12%.
That issue has already been raised, so let's get into it. Let's talk about money. Carol Felsenthal did a piece the other day about the question that Carol Marin did not ask during the rather spirited debate that was on the other night. And I thought, by the way, Carol did a very good job of trying to nail some of these things down. But one of the questions that was not asked of Rahm Emanuel was, Rahm, when you presumably win on Tuesday and walk off with this, you're going to have, what could it be, $10 million left that you could spend? And we have this other thing, the Greg Goldner operation called Better Chicago. Now, they're out there raising all kinds of money. They've already spent $177,000 that we know of, but nobody knows where that money's coming from. So there could be, I don't know, who knows really, but 12, 13, 14 million dollars that could get dumped into the runoffs for the aldermanic campaigns, and there could be, I don't know, maybe a dozen runoffs. That's a lot of money. You could buy a high-quality alderman for that kind of money.
You know, what makes this For a Better Chicago PAC story so interesting is, number one, it looks as though Greg Goldner's looked at the playbook from 2007 when SEIU was the major force in terms of dollars. And we saw the effect that had. It actually delivered a number of aldermen who are very pro-union. Greg Goldner himself, longtime advisor to Mayor Daley, ran one of Rahm's campaigns, and
was it for the House?
I believe it was, and you know, is sort of one of the preeminent political consultants in town. And then this notion that, you know, you can raise that amount of money and distribute it to aldermanic candidates and not know where it comes from. You know,
it's astounding.
It really is, and we've seen candidates already have to return some campaign contributions. Gary Chico comes to mind. And so, you know, I think there's been a complaint filed in the Illinois State Board of Elections saying, look, it's not fair to the public to have this type of opaque, you know, surrounding these dollars. And then, to your point, it is going to be very interesting in the event that Emanuel wins and avoids a runoff to see how he starts to build a coalition of candidates. Who's he going to back? You know, there's a very good chance that the pro-business, pro-labor equilibrium within the city council could be 50-50, and so that's going to go a long way toward really pointing the direction of where the city's going.
Right. No, and I think that's really what we're witnessing. I mean, I think we are at a crossroads in the city where we are, if we did not like Daley because he was an autocrat, he was an autocrat who was a populist. And I think what we will see if Rahm Emanuel does not make it in, if he makes it through both either runoff or next Tuesday, you know, there's a style that he has, and it is a style that is autocratic, but it's also elitist. And that will be a change for the city of Chicago.
As opposed to the mayor, who you don't consider an elitist.
No, I think Daley is someone who is really rooted in the neighborhoods, and someone who's been, you know, public servant, as we have defined public servants in the city of Chicago. I think Rahm Emanuel is representing a new breed in electoral politics, and a new sector, if you will, which are the super rich. And that is something that we haven't quite seen in the city represented that way.
The other dynamic in that is that if you have a new council, you have a new council that has a new mayor, a new style of mayor, a new incarnation of mayor. So now you have 50 people on council who now think, it was amazing to me how they all seem to find their voice as soon as Daley said, "Hey, I'm not running again." Said,
I was never a supporter of that
Who
guy.
is that guy? Said, well, that's your alderman. I said, I've never heard of him before. You know, but they found their voice, and now now they're talking about, well, we want more oversight of this, and we want to do more of this, and we want to do more of this. It will be interesting to see if that kind of thing can happen. You know,
I would never have voted for that parking meter thing if I had just read it.
Well, yeah, and there were 5 people who didn't vote for it, but everybody else did. And said, hey, I didn't get the chance to read it. I said, then why'd you vote? You know, but because the mayor told them to. You know, and so now we're hearing people say, well, I don't have to be told anymore. I'm not going to listen anymore. You know, and we'll see if that happens. But that actually, I'm much more excited about that than I am about, you know, whoever the mayor is, because if we have a council that is active and it is not beholden to anybody, then you might see somebody compared council and the current mayor to a Kremlin kind of thing, where, you know, the people on top tell you what to do and that's what you do.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea that now these 50 people will actually have a voice and may actually come up with some ideas, you know, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, it's interesting, Maria. You raised the question earlier about you know, where the money is coming from. I mean, I just think that when, to me, we were hearing, even sitting around this table a couple of weeks ago, about, oh, you know, the unions are going to buy this. They have $1 million to spread around. They're going to make a big deal out of this, and then you suddenly start putting this, and you don't notice it at first, but then you start thinking about the Hollywood fundraiser for Rahm Emanuel, and then you start seeing Steve Jobs and all these other people spending lots and lots of money, and you start thinking, this is something that, you know, for a long time, we've always referred to Chicago as being like the biggest cow town in America. And it kind of is. You know, we're really kind of rubes in a lot of ways, because we've never had that before. We've never had a mayor who just can, like, jet out to the coast and bring back wheelbarrows full of money. And so the game is different.
But to be honest, we've only had 4 mayors.
Well, that's right. That's right. And Harold Washington sure didn't have that.
He wasn't jetting out there.
Sawyer and Jane Byrne
were, you know, so you had the 2 dailies, bookends.
So the game is different now, and what we're starting to see, or at least what's beginning to dawn on me, is that we're going to have a city that's kind of like New York, or like maybe the United States House of Representatives, where money will talk in a way that it's never talked before. As we, you know, we spend a lot of time kind of talking about all the minutia and all the things that are going on in these campaigns, but in the last couple of weeks, it's begun to dawn on me that, wow, this is the real story here, that there is money sloshing around in this town like we've never seen before.
And you're right, it's a different kind of money. It's not the kind of money where, you know, contractors and those kind of people were trying to get influence. These are people who are outside of the city, who are just, you know, buying into the celebrities.
Spectator sport.
Right, and people forget that, you know, Rahm was the chief of staff for the president of the United States, and so people were buying into that. They're actually selling that, you know, and so you have that kind of access now.
Before, the money was coming from our own homegrown illegal dumpers and hired truckers and guys like that.
It's a new machine. It's the money machine. It's a celebrity machine. It's we're not buying our way into you know, having influence. We're buying our way into parties, and I worry in terms of City of Chicago has a huge debt. We have huge problems. It is still a city that, as much as we'd like to say we've moved beyond race, it's a very racially divided city. And those are challenges that I'm not sure celebrities can sort of wipe away.
I think a lot of Chicagoans, in true Chicago fashion, believe that the sort of ladder or the hierarchy is Congressman, Chief of Staff to the President of the United States, Mayor of Chicago.
Well, see, but I would say Chief of Staff that maybe perhaps was fired.
Could be. What I'm interested in is, and I think a lot of voters,
there's a shakeout.
I think a lot of voters wonder, you know, if they did a poll and asked, what does Richard M. Daley want to do for the rest of his life politically? I think they'd say he wants to be mayor forever.
Well, of course, why not?
Yeah, and I wonder, you know, when you go, what goes through Rahm Emanuel's mind when he thinks about his political future? Is he going to sort of take on that mantle of I will be mayor for as long as, you know, I can be, or is this perceived as perhaps a stepping stone to something bigger? And if so, what could be bigger than mayor of Chicago?
Again, biggest cow town in America. How could there be a political job more important than mayor of Chicago? It's not possible. We can't conceive of that. So. I want to just sort of veer off of the whole thing for a moment because I'm just really enjoying having you guys here. You're all so knowledgeable about so many things. We saw this week what I thought was some pretty stunning news, that we've lost 200 and some thousand population in the city of Chicago. The vast majority of it, from what we can see in the early numbers, appear to be black Chicagoans who have out-migrated from Chicago. The cynic might say, well, then the plan for transformation really was successful, wasn't it? They closed down the CHA, they kicked a bunch of people out of the city, and they're all now suburbanites.
Well, and that actually was the plan, and it did work. If you close down all of that public housing, and basically they didn't have any other place for them to go in the city.
Right.
You know, so places like Maywood, Harvey, you know, those very close suburbs, and then even the further suburbs. You know, that's where people moved. Some of them moved and they moved their same lifestyle there, you know, but some of them moved further and found jobs or still commuting. You know, so it's an interesting, you know, phenomenon in terms of that out migration, but it was planned.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll see how that plays out when it's time to redraw districts.
Well, we certainly will, because that brings the whole thing back into the political realm again,
Right.
And you have some of these very interesting races where the ethnic or racial population of the wards is changing, not in the way that we always think of when we talk about, you know, changing neighborhoods. It's a whole different dynamic, and the political dynamic is changing with it. Kind of the second ward stuff that we're seeing happening right now.
But we're also seeing, for instance, Latino candidates running in the 43rd ward.
Yes,
Vargas, because I think there's a young breed of Latino with political aspirations that see that the numbers aren't going to change and the wards aren't going to change, and so you are seeing a lot more crossover. I think you see that in Gary Chico's race. I think Miguel del Valle has sort of stuck a little bit closer to the neighborhood, but at least in terms of the Latino community, it does put on the table coalition building in a way that perhaps you didn't necessarily need to do that through the city council races in the past.
That's an interesting thing to me, because it's too simplistic to say. But when we get into this whole discussion about whether we're post-racial or everything, well, obviously we're not post-racial. What we're just talking about is that large portions of one population are essentially being expelled from the city. So we're hardly that. But yet, as a generational thing, there is an acceptance of cross-racial, I don't know what you want to call it, acceptance that we've not seen before.
Right.
And I still have to say, and this makes me sound very old, but I'm amazed to see the kind of numbers that Rahm Emanuel's racking up in the black community. I was not expecting
But Daley racked up those numbers. You know, Daley racked up those kinds of numbers. Daley was in some places 70%. You know, now there weren't a whole lot of people running against him.
Right.
You know, but
that's
Daley,
why I think I saw it as something different.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe that's why. But yeah,
the African American community voted for both Daleys. You know, and in large numbers. So that aspect of it is not so surprising to me. The surprising thing is that what I seem to see is as kind of a class breakdown. you know, where there are certain members of the community who are going this way, and then other members who are going the other way.
Right. That's
you know,
a very
and
good
I'm
point.
sure it's something that's happening in the Hispanic community also.
Yeah.
You start looking at that and say, okay, we're not so much separating by race as much anymore, but there is
By
a separation.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think that's happened with our candidates. I mean, I'm saying the candidates, Miguel del Valle and Gary Chico. I think it's been interesting because I think Miguel has sort of run a campaign more as an outsider when he really is not an outsider. I mean,
he is the,
Madigan.
He was the clerk.
he is the clerk.
Well, and then he became the clerk, but he was Madigan's person for many years. And Gary Chico, I think, because of his neighborhood and sort of union background, has really brought a lot of the union to the table. But what you're saying, Ken, and I mean back to what you were saying as well, the Latino community did vote for Daley, but also for Harold Washington.
That's true.
So I think that there is sometimes we don't give the electorate enough
That's right.
credit.
That's
You know, that is the point.
Yeah,
That's the point right
of
there.
Being able to
don't.
discern who's necessarily going to be your winner out there. Sometimes people vote for the winner because they want to be on the winning side.
And that's probably what's happening here too. There's a great deal of that. Here's a guy who's he's a celebrity. He's a big celebrity. You know, we'd be remiss if we didn't spend some time really getting down into the granular politics of things, especially since we got you here, Jim, and this is your specialty. There are a lot of ward races that we really need to talk about. I noticed one that I find very interesting is Danny Solis in the 25th Ward, who seems to be up against some very strong, and there's an environmental component. Can you believe it? We're talking about the environment. We're talking about closing the Fisk plant and all that, you know, the Fisk generating plant.
You know, the interesting aspect about the 25th Ward race, and I think this is also true of the 12th Ward and possibly the 10th Ward, is you have 3 incumbent aldermen who were very closely aligned with the Richard M. Daley political operation for many years, strong allies of the mayor. And they all have strong challengers now, and yet I don't think they can rely upon, to the extent that they did, that same type of get-out-the-vote operation and campaign operation. So if any of those incumbents are forced into a runoff, it'll be interesting to see if that was the cause. The 41st Ward on the northwest side is an interesting one. You have a longtime aide of incumbent, now retiring, Brian Doherty, who's going up against the committeeman. You have, of course, the 8 all-in-the-family ward races, where there's some son of a prominent alderman or
Marcel Beavers,
right.
and
Roderick Sawyer.
And I think Tillman, even
Madrona,
Harry Osterman in the 40th Ward. You have
Cullerton.
Deborah Silverstein, who's the wife of...
These must be good jobs, because everybody wants to keep them in the family as long as they can.
But what it boils down to is, you know, how many runoffs can we expect? I think there might be as many as 20. I mean, there's
You think so?
Yeah, I definitely think there's going to be 10. Remember, a lot of these ward races have 18 candidates. You know, it's very hard. Name identification is going to be really the key in a lot of these races.
So that was what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you because I don't think there's much point in asking for predictions on the mayor's race, but let's talk about the number of runoffs. You're saying 20.
Yeah, I think I can just read off the ones where I think it's very likely. 12th, 18th, 24th. That's the one with 18 candidates. 38th, even though Cullerton has a lot of money and a huge number of endorsements, he's got some good challengers.
I was going to bring that one up here. Where is that? I happen to live there.
And
we're talking about having a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
I get one of these about 3 times a day pushed through my door for Cullerton. I mean, you know, after all, ladies and gentlemen, there's been a Cullerton running our ward for the last 100 years. Let's not stop it now. But I mean, you know, there are a lot of other people running, but boy, this guy's got money behind him.
Sure. And he's a longtime city official with the building department, so he definitely knows the ins and outs of the ward operation. The 45th Ward is going to be interesting because here you have sort of the anointed candidate to replace Alderman Patrick LeVar. She's Marina Faz Huppert, and she's got about $500,000. She's a union official, or maybe a former union official, and she's going up against 6 other challengers.
But she got an endorsement the other day from Tony Preckwinkle, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, has to help her. I imagine.
It's fascinating, but yeah.
The 50th Ward is the one you have to talk about that.
The 50th, burning.
Alderman Stone, you know, if he can. You know, avoid, I don't know if he can avoid a runoff, he probably can't, but if he can get into runoff it's going to be really great to watch him, you know, with his sort of history in the city council and his something and vinegar.
I can't leave now, the people need me, I think is basically his campaign slogan, right? It's like, you've got to vote for me because I'm the only guy who remembers how it's done.
Well, and it was his son who was also running for mayor, right?
Right, running for mayor.
I think with all the things that you brought up, though, the question becomes, is the daily machine dead? If the Rahm machine is coming, does that mean the daily machine is dead, or are they the same machine?
Yeah, has it recreated
Well,
itself?
right. I mean, for all speculation again, but I think that Daley is backing Rahm Emanuel. I mean, for weeks we've heard people who are interested in certain kinds of jobs are already being interviewed, and that interview process is being facilitated by the fifth floor. So
you want
I'm
any
not
proof
sure
of that? Franz Spielman today. Now this, to me, is a great story.
Oh, well, there you go.
Rahm Emanuel apparently just sent a friendly letter to every city employee just saying, don't worry about your pension. And all those things I was saying, we're going to be fine. And then, of course, a lot of people...
But does he know there's still an election, okay? We do have very fluid. And remember Jane Byrne and Harold Washington?
Yeah.
It was that last weekend before the primary where the whole thing blew
kind
up.
of blew up.
You know,
Well,
I'm not advocating for blowing up, but I'm advocating for, you know, it may get very spicy out there.
I find it interesting, though, that you know, particularly all the union people who seem to be lining up with Chico are saying, just exactly how did you know that I'm a city employee, and where did you get my address? I mean, there must be a database somewhere, but I wouldn't think you would have that. So, you know, is Rahm connected with some people in City Hall who'd like to see him carry on? Yeah. Oh, I think it's a good guess.
Yeah.
There are people who say, and I think I'm one of them, that it's not a knock on Rahm Emanuel to say that it would be really great if he could get put into a runoff, because he only got in the race really about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
It would be nice to have a spirited race between Rahm, and I don't care if it's Carol Mosley Braun or Gary Chico or whatever. It would just be great to see a real one-on-one.
Well, a little bit more substance, because I think we've gotten into, he's avoided, and I think that's one of the things that we've seen with the debates. He has avoided talking about issues. At some point he said he was only going to talk about 3. You know, this is a very complex city and with many, many problems. And so you're absolutely right. I think a debate, if we have a runoff, would be...
We're going to have to cut you off there. I'm really sorry to say we've just run out of time, as we always do. Lou Ransom from the Defender is with us. From the UIC, we've had Maria Torres joining us today, and Jimm Dispensa from Early and Often. Thanks so much for being with us. Remember, you can watch us here all the time. You can hear us as an audio podcast, all those things. You know, we say that every week. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. Thanks for watching.
That went fast.